Welcome to the East Bay's best podcast, The Capstone Conversation. This is a show that interviews political, government, and community leaders in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano counties. We look at what is going on in your city, how are we developing things economically, and where are we going from here? I'm your host, Jared Ash. Hey, welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. We've been talking to a lot of elected officials recently in the East Bay, but today we're going to take a different look on what's going on out here. We're joined by Jim Wunderman of the Bay Area Council. So welcome, Jim, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me aboard.
Yeah. So do you want to tell our audience who is the Bay Area Council and what is some of the projects that they've been up to?
Yeah, sure. So the Bay Area Council was formed at the end of World War II by government and business leaders of the time, Governor Earl Warren, and mayors of the major cities, and the Bechtels, the Kaisers, the kind of industrialists who really made the Bay Area economically successful during the war. And the war was coming to an end, and they said, okay, what's next? And so the Bay Area Council was formed with that what's next kind of question. The first major project that I think your audience would be familiar with was the idea was to think about the Bay Area as a region. Back in 1945, people didn't think about the Bay Area as a region. I don't even think there was a Bay Area, really. It was these separate cities, and there was a lot of farmland and pasture grazing area. And Bay Area Council helped people think about this place as a region and how it could develop as one. And one thing we did was we said a region needs a mass transit system. So we created BART. That was a committee of the Bay Area Council said, let's make a mass transit system. And we made BART, legislated it, conceived it, mapped it out, and funded it in a 3-county ballot measure at the time. So we created the Bay Area Air Quality Management District in the 1950s because we had a lot of pollution in the Bay Area. So the Bay Area Council is always about looking at things from a regional perspective, regional economy, people traveling about, needing to move about. How does one part of the Bay Area affect the other parts of the Bay Area? Kind of looking at the Bay Area holistically. So that's really the gist of what we do. And we created the ferry system, of which I chair, called WETA, Water Emergency Transportation Authority, that serves the East Bay to the West Bay and now kind of heading south, and with the notion that we want to give people a very kind of choice transit option, but at the same time also see the waterfront as an opportunity for development, not just protection. And so we're on a mission to expand that system. We've been very successful at it so far. We plan to do more terminals, more locations, more frequent interconnecting service, things like that. So I could go on and on about the Bay Area Council. Housing being a really big issue in any region. We've pushed through, I don't know how many housing bills we've sponsored, but it's a lot. Even in this last session, several. Getting at what cities are required to do in order to meet the housing demand that exists in the region and in their cities. Some of the mayors listening to this will say, oh, isn't that great? And others will say, oh, so it's your fault, Wunderman, that they're pushing this stuff on us. Because typically, in cities, there isn't a cacophony of demand for housing in cities. The people who live there already live there, so they're not demanding to live there again. It's people outside who want to get in, and there's not enough supply. So the area's hundreds of thousands of units behind in supply. Up until around 1980, we built a lot of housing after World War II, to about 1980 or so, and then we stopped building housing. We made it very laborious and expensive and difficult. And we're paying a price for that because our kids can't afford to live here. We're thinking our kids won't be able to stay. They're going to leave California. They're going to leave the Bay Area. It's just too expensive. So we have to we get at problems like that, complex, modern day, urban-ish problems. Not that the whole Bay Area is urban by any means, and we're not really an urbanist group. We have as much respect for the suburban areas and the needs of people who live in the communities along the 680 corridor, for example, as we do with folks in San Francisco.
Great. Well, that's a good background on who you guys are. And in the 50s, the Bay Area was 2.3 million people, because I just looked it up. And today, I believe we're over 9, depending on how you count us. So that is
Yeah.
a big shift, right?
Yeah.
And
San Jose had 45,000 people back there was no Silicon Valley. Like, it was a very different place. So places change, but that's part of stewardship is managing change. Things, you can't just put a cake plate over it. Some people would like to do that, but it doesn't work very well in practice.
And before we get to the East Bay, I think we want to touch base on San Francisco and the Doom Loop. One of the biggest factors in that Doom Loop is that most people from the East Bay aren't commuting into San Francisco or Oakland anymore. But why don't you tell listeners, what is the Doom Loop officially, and what is the outlook for it, and what are some solutions to the problems?
Yeah, sure. Just for your listeners' background, I served as deputy mayor in San Francisco twice under Mayors Feinstein and Frank Jordan in the 90s. So it's been a while, but I have a history there and a pretty good understanding of what makes the city tick. And the way the city, San Francisco, was designed really was about it being a commuter city. Have a downtown plan. Let's put more offices in the downtown area, especially on the South of Market side, and see that grow. And we'll have more people. We'll also build housing, but mostly we're going to see commuters coming in and going home, and doubling its population from 700 to 800,000 on a given day. That's the population of the city, to 1.5 million. So our recent health concern, the pandemic, really froze that, and people stopped coming. People stopped going to work in person. Larger, if they had white collar type jobs and they weren't necessitated to be there, then they weren't there, and even other kinds of jobs. So that really, in a very profound way, impacted cities, and especially San Francisco. And San Francisco has more what we would classify as remote work jobs than any city in America. Over half of San Francisco's jobs are what we call remote work eligible. So people stay home, and they got used to being at home. And they started using the services of wherever home was. In some cases, it was San Francisco neighborhoods instead of downtown. But probably in more cases, it was in our suburban areas, our suburban cities. So there's a new livelihood in the suburban cities. I live in Pleasant Hill. And if I go to Jack's Restaurant, which I always like Jack's Restaurant in Pleasant Hill. But I can't get in there at lunchtime. You got to plan that one. It's a big restaurant. And there's a lot like that. No matter where you are in the Bay Area, there seems to be something like the story. So that really has a very profound effect on our cities, big cities that drew commuters, Oakland, but especially San Jose too. And they're all hurting in different ways. But San Francisco has become famous for its woes. And the things that were troubling San Francisco before the pandemic, more visible homelessness, uptick in crime, car break-ins, those things were actually happening. But people were kind of looking the other way somehow. But in and after the pandemic, that changed. And those have become defining issues. The on-street, open-air drug dealing, fentanyl use, addiction, sense of lawlessness, fear, those have become really big issues for San Francisco. And they're having an effect on the whole region as well. So people are finding alternative ways to live their lives. Some people have left. So we've actually seen, for the first time, some significant population decline, but it's not huge. It's modest population decline, I'd say. But a lot of folks moved from San Francisco to the suburbs, where they moved from the suburbs to the Sacramento suburbs. When most of the shift really took place here in Northern California. It's not like most people got up and moved to Boise or Austin and those things here, but people did that too. So San Francisco is struggling to redefine itself, and its downtown was really designed to inhale these office workers in large doses, and the office workers aren't coming in those same numbers anymore. It's there's an uptick, people returning to work, but it's not happening at a very fast rate. Today, BART's ridership is a little over 40% of what it was pre-pandemic. That has really serious implications to the future of the BART system, for example. And BART always depended heavily on fares for its finance. About 70% of BART's pre-pandemic budget was covered in fares. Well, when you lose 60% of your riders, that's going to have a magnificent effect that it has. So there's some real questions about the viability of transit systems. And it is a bit of a spiral. People don't come. Situation feels like it's getting worse. So more people don't come. A lot of times, talk to people where I live and say, hey, somebody is going into the theater in San Francisco. They're going to see a show there. They're going there? Oh, I wouldn't go there. Have you gone there? So it's become a question where it wasn't a question before. People always saw San Francisco as a destination. And now San Francisco has to win hearts and minds back from the region itself, from its own neighborhoods, and then nationally and internationally. This was a city that had the highest scores in the world in terms of tourism desirability. And that's definitely fallen by the wayside. And if you go to Europe and you say to people, I'm from San Francisco, they give you this expression like, ooh, are you okay? So it's really it's amazing what a problem can do when it becomes exacerbated by a lot of media coverage. And a lot of people don't like San Francisco, starting in New York. New York is jealous of San Francisco, and the New York media is very dominating. And so there were a lot of stories in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times about just how bad we are. And the stories are overblown. In truth, go to North Beach like I did I think it was last Friday night. I just walked around North Beach. You can get a seat in a bar or a restaurant to save your life. The place is absolutely crazy. That's not the story they're going to write in the New York Times.
Sure. So let's pivot that to the East Bay. What opportunities does that create? And I know the East Bay is broad, so we'll start broad and then we'll narrow down some of the different geographies. But with more people working from home or not wanting to commute as far, what opportunities do you see out here?
Yeah, so the East Bay really saw itself and was seen as a bedroom community of San Francisco. And that's changing. And so people are beginning to experience more of their life in the East Bay and look for ways to have that life be more rewarding. And so what's happened is we've seen restaurants grow and new restaurants come in. There seems to be more entertainment, more activity, and more a sense of place is developing. It's not there yet, but it's definitely happening. And some places are taking advantage of it more than others. Some are being more thoughtful about it than others. But generally speaking, that seems to be the direction of things, is that it's revenge of the suburbs. Okay. For a while, all everyone wanted to talk about was cities. You got to be in the city. And now it's really reversed quite a bit. And there's a tremendous interest. You look at the home prices shot up, even with really high interest rates, they haven't come down a whole lot. So I think that's an opportunity for the subregions in the East Bay to kind of come together. A lot of the cities they're really too small to be defining places. So if you've got a population of 40, 50,000 people and there's a little it's not quite enough maybe to really send out a big message about what's here. Therefore, I think what's happening or will happen is different parts of the region will kind of come together and present themselves as subregions and as places that offer certain amenities and lifestyles and things like that.
Well, and along those lines, I recently heard you speak at the Diablo Valley Community College, their tech initiative group, and you kind of laid out a challenge to some of the cities and their economic development staff that was there about working together and forming a region. Talk more about your challenge there, what you mean, and what you see is that, what can that region accomplish by working together?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a pretty great region. And I guess I'm talking here about the 680 corridor, more or less from Walnut Creek to the Benicia Bridge. So those cities that live either along the 680 or close to it.
The northern waterfront. Yep.
Yeah, these areas. It's a pretty cool area. It has BART built into it, assuming we can. I don't think BART's going to go away. Maybe up for some redefinition. It's even been expanded with eBART, so there's more opportunity there. There always was a lot of retail in the area, so In one way, it's good. There's a lot of retail. In another way, there's probably too much retail. That means there could be some internal land opportunities. There's the Concord Naval Weapons Station, which someday, hopefully, we'll see developed into something really great. It's now in the hands of the city and Brookfield, who they've selected to develop it, which Brookfield certainly has a lot of capacity. So there's some, I think, real opportunities in the area. The weather is great. The Diablo Valley College is capable of producing a very capable workforce. The proximity to UC Berkeley, UC Davis is really something people don't think about. But these communities are really very close to a couple of the top research institutions in the whole world. And so there's a lot here. And I think what we really need to see, as your question leads, and what I said is, but you got to come together. It's got to hold together as a story. What is this area? If you look at the economic growth of the Bay Area during the period of post-mortgage meltdown, the rest of the Bay Area was really thriving economically. This area here didn't grow at all. GDP was pretty flat. Why is that? Is it because it's a bedroom community to San Francisco and there really was nothing driving the growth? Is it that people don't care? There's really no company, they're there to really grow from. And there's probably a lot of things. We're talking about the industries that drive things, the technology related industries, which have a way of producing a lot of jobs and supporting an economy. That's really kind of digging a little deep here and say, okay, what exists in these cities already? What can we build on? And how do we get people, more involved and institutions more involved in the place, and the companies that are here more civically engaged, and the institutions that are here to be more focused on where this community is and where it could be. It's exciting.
Well, and I talk a lot about the Gomentum station at the largest autonomous vehicle testing station at the Naval Weapons Station run by CCTA. And there's a lot of opportunity to expand that in the future years, to get the state involved, to get the region involved, to get Buchanan Field involved as an airport logistical hub for those companies. And I think there's a good potential to recruit smart businesses in the autonomous space, in the future of transportation right here in this region as one goal among life sciences that everybody wants to try to attract.
Well, it's huge. This transformation toward EV and AV it's like going from the horse and carriage to the automobile a century ago. It's kind of the same thing. And there's going to be a lot of pressure not to do it so fast. It's dangerous, et cetera, which means for a place that can be a safety hub for autonomous vehicles, right? So you can, have maybe a very sophisticated testing ground, which is, already in place. That's going to mean something. I think, again, there has to be more development of the idea. There has to be more of a business concept behind it. Businesses haven't really seen this part of the Bay Area as being very important. It really was a retail hub. People moved out here and bought stuff for their house. So that has to change a little bit. This has to be seen in a bit of a different light.
And what's the solution to that, in your opinion?
Well, I think you got to start with what is the economic base of the region? What's changing? We've got a lot of oil refineries. Those oil refineries probably won't be there forever. We're moving out of the oil business little by little. So some planning has to occur to determine what the future of those sites, and we need to begin retraining people who aren't going to be there much longer in those jobs. I think that this region is part of California, and California is very committed to moving on when it comes to greenhouse gases and pollutants and so forth. And I would say those industries were the commanding industries of this subregion, and they weren't growth industries. So we really want to think about what we can have here that has growth potential. And
at least one of those is already approved to move into a facility. And so that'll be a good transition over the next couple of years. And hopefully the others will move there.
Yeah.
we've also talked about how Livermore, the Tri-Valley area, has been more successful than either East Contra Costa or the 880 corridor. And I know you guys, the Bay Area Council, was involved in that. Why do you think that area has attracted more business and grown a little faster than that 880 industrial area or the North 680?
Yeah, I think it's precisely for the reason that you have a bunch of cities out there, Pleasanton, Dublin, Livermore, San Ramon, that really got together and said, look, we each have stuff, but we're more powerful as one. And so they created a group, Innovation Tri-Valley. They started holding meetings. They sort of put out the idea that this can be bigger and better and really be enhancing for our region. And it really took hold. And the Bay Area Council did a couple of good studies, really looking deeply into what industries are here, what companies are here, and so forth. They had a head start to some degree over this northern central Contra Costa district in that, the proximity to Silicon Valley, but the southern portion of the 880 has even better proximity and didn't do quite as well. Although there's some really good things happening there too. Certainly Fremont has done very well. So I think people get excited when they kind of come together for purpose, has been my observation. And if you give people purpose and you make it kind of social, they love it. They make friends, they get to talk in front of each other, they get to talk each other up, and they get to celebrate what they have. And so the mayors of those cities really got together. They worked with their members of Congress. They worked with their members of the state legislature. Like, people were very aware of where they were trying to go. They brought in the Bay Area Council, which said, hey, we're an important part of this region. Don't ignore us. We're not just the old Livermore Valley wine district. There's something happening here. So that has to happen. That's a really good model of what can happen in any place when people come together. Goes back to what you said earlier.
And so when you talk about purpose there and that they had one and they all like to come together, there's a group with a purpose up in Solano County, the California for Forever. And there's a lot of questions and concerns about that, but a group of wealthy individuals have bought up more land than is in the city of San Francisco. So it has the potential to add 1 million people. They're not talking about adding 1 million people, though. Any thoughts on that and the opportunity, and what does that do for housing in Northern California?
Well, it's basically creating a new city, not a new idea. And if you kind of look at the architecture of Northern California, there's a lot of new cities out there where people, it may not quite be to the scale of this or the way they went about it, but maybe one person on one huge ranch that covered the whole area could be. But bottom line is that city formation is not a new concept. Here in California, people get very reticent about anything new, anything big. Housing, forget about. So I think it's making people nervous, but they've got a kind of a clean slate. And I think there's probably a lot of potential to it. It depends how they go about it. And I think there's an opportunity, because it hasn't been built yet, to incorporate some of the better planning approaches that we've seen in the world, so that it's an area that doesn't require you to get in your car every time you need something, and that you can do more walking and biking and really have a great new area of the Bay Area. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I worry about the places that could be left behind. It doesn't necessarily mean just because you build something in the outer reaches of Solano County doesn't mean you come up with a great new plan for downtown San Francisco and make that thriving, because they're very different things. They're very different places. Or San Jose, downtown San Jose, or Oakland. I think those things can come. I think it's important that at the time that these leaders, tech leaders, very wealthy people are thinking about this new thing, they don't forget about the old thing, because that could be a real drag on the whole region. If we fail to reimagine these cities. It's really a shame on us moment. And we need these leaders to help. We need their wealth. We need their ingenuity and innovation. We need them. So I'm hoping there's some balance to be found there, but I certainly wouldn't want to, I don't think we should write off the idea of having kind of a incredible new place that we can grow into here. It could be great.
Well, that's good. What do you see as the biggest challenge for continued growth in the East Bay? Sounds like transit is one, economic development. But what do you see as some of the challenges ahead and maybe some of the solutions? Some that could come from Sacramento or DC even?
Yeah, look, I think the East Bay grew up kind of fast. Some people feel impacted by local traffic, things like that. There's a lot of NIMBYs in the East Bay. There just are, right? They're used to the place being the way it is, and they don't need any more of it. And so they're reluctant. So I think there really needs to be a movement that the elected officials can get behind and get excited about, and that their leadership can really drive the growth and the improvements and the new what's to come, rather than them being dragged to vote against investments and improvements because people with a similarly colored T-shirt all get up at the council meeting and scream, "No way." And so that's where I think the opportunity is to come together, and let's just agree that a lot of what's in the East Bay was built at a time that was a different time. So now we need to rethink some of these areas. The way we did them just really isn't consistent with what we need now. We need something different. I look at it as I drive about. I see a lot of aging kind of strip mall centers, and I see a lot of stores that are out, and I have a feeling nobody's coming in. And we probably need to repurpose a lot of that and do it thoughtfully. And that could provide a lot of housing. It could provide entertainment. It could provide new lifestyle opportunities. And these places tend to be in the central part of cities. So they're often very well located.
I was talking to two different mayors that said one of the biggest problems that they're having with some of those shopping centers you're talking about that are nearly dead is that it was owned by grandpa in the 1960s or something. And now it could be 10 or 30 entities, family members that have a share in it. And so what they have found is they have one anchor store and one or two other stores that come and go. They're still making cash flow on those because property taxes hasn't changed much and things haven't changed. So if you have an anchor that's giving you cash flow, even if each family, if you have 20 or 30 families, is still making $2,000 a month, but maybe they're also getting losses from the vacancies that is equal to $20,000 or $30,000 off their W-2 taxes. It's a win for those people. And when developers have come in and tried to buy that out, they can't even get 20% of the families to come to a meeting because they're just happy with the status quo. Where even if those families developed it themselves, you got to bring everything up to code. You got to really invest in it. And there's been this laissez-faire approach, and people could probably name half a dozen in Concord, one or two in Pleasant Hill. I'm sure we can go throughout the whole Bay Area and name them, but that's a big problem. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, momentum is important. And once you start seeing something, when I started, I've been in this job 20 years. So when I came, we were talking about, my predecessor was a woman named Sonny McPeak, who was a Contra Costa supervisor and had this job for a bunch of years, and then went on to become Arnold Schwarzenegger's secretary for business, transportation, and housing at the time. So she was very well known in planning circles, and she was very influential, I think, in the area. And she was all about transit-oriented development. I think she might have invented the term, but there was really not a lot of examples of it around at that time. And there was a lot of resistance to it because you're basically going into a suburban area where it's all single family private homes and saying, we're not going to do that over here because there's transit here. So we want to densify that area. So she was able to accomplish that at the Contra Costa Center, Pleasant Hill, BART Station. Then we had at least one that was under construction. It was happening. And then a couple of others. And then before you knew it, they were popping up like all over the place because there was momentum. People started to see the opportunity rather than see the risk in it. So I think it's a complicated problem. There are such a thing as government issued tax incentives for fully depreciated property. So let's say these older strip malls, they're fully depreciated. If you offer the owners some kind of a major tax abatement when the property gets sold, they don't have to pay any capital gains on it, right? Because it's going to a higher, better use. And eventually the community is going to gain the benefit of new jobs and construction activity and all housing and all those good things that we say we want. It might work out financially for the community as well as for the people who say, hey, look, there's a bigger opportunity here than just sitting on this old strip mall. So I don't know. I'm not an expert in real estate or the public finance and those kinds of things. Where there's a will, there's a way. And if that's, you've gone a long way here to define the problem. Okay. Once you know what the problem is, you can start thinking about solutions. You've given me some thought here.
One other question, not sure if this is in your expertise, but talk about P3s, right? Comes up a lot. Cities that are strapped for cash, how can they work with an organization like yours or others to foster some public-private partnerships to launch to the next level that we're talking about?
Well, there's really very little restriction on them from a city level. From the state has a kind of a political problem with P3s for big infrastructure and so forth. There's, I guess, the Caltrans engineers like to design and build projects, and they don't want anyone coming in the fold there. But I think in local areas, there really isn't much of an obstacle to doing it, but it takes savvy local government to make it happen. The public side of the public-private partnership is really important. And it isn't just going to happen because there's private capital sitting on the sideline and there's needs. And so it's just going to happen. It doesn't. It really needs facility in order to make it happen. And that, I think, implies government leadership. The mayor of the town has to be talking about it. The city council has to agree. Public-private partnerships means growth. What we're talking about here is building something, doing something. And so it has to become really good to do something. If we can agree that we're going to do something, then the next is, well, how are we going to do it? And public-private partnerships is one really good way to do a lot of things, right? And so I'd be hopeful to see, we've talked about this a lot, and there isn't enough of that activity happening as much as it should. And it can happen at a local project level, but it also could happen to build infrastructure we think we need, but we don't have the finance to do it. I'll give you an example. I guess it certainly attaches to the East Bay would be Highway 37. So Highway 37 is going away. Wave to it. It's going away unless we rebuild it. And if it goes away, it's going to cause a real problem for the economies of Solano County. It's going to really hurt northern Marin County and Mendocino County, because people, they go for their weekends in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. They come down from Sacramento and they come across, and then they go back up. If that highway is not there, they're not going to do that anymore. There's no way to get there. So they have to. So we need to fix that road. Well, it's a very long road. It doesn't carry that many cars, so it's expensive on a unit basis to do it. But if you think about it, people are probably willing to pay a toll to have a new road that comes through there. And if people are willing to pay a toll, then there's probably entities that could build that road that could do it a hell of a lot better and faster. It's it's an easy job. Once you know what you want to do, there's companies that could do that in a flash. So that's the kind of project I think of, but there's a lot of projects like it. And maybe a new Martinez Bridge for the trains eventually to kind of come across there and run Caltrain from San Jose all the way to Sacramento and beyond, right? So that imagine a fast train from San Jose up through San Francisco and the East Bay to Oakland and across. And so yeah, it's big money to do it, but you think about the advantages of these kinds of things. In some cases, there just might not be enough public money to do it, but there might be private money to do it.
Well, and anybody who's listening to this, who's ever gone on 37, which is anybody going up to Napa or Sonoma, you are stuck on that as it is. It is, no matter what time of day, what day of the week, it is a very slow moving road. Going away would only make that commute worse because there's not many alternatives. So public,
I mean, look at the Richmond Bridge. There's a story wrong today and about the jams that have now come on the Richmond Bridge, and Bay Area Council's been saying, let's take out the bike lane. Let's replace the bike lane with cars. It was built for 3 lanes of cars. Nobody's using the bike lane. It's a pilot project. There is such a thing as things that don't work. And you try them out and good intentions, right? But it's not working. And so you sit in this massive traffic jam to try to get on this bridge. And then there's this bike lane and nobody's in it, right? Especially in the commute hours. There's nobody in it. Maybe there's a better way to do this kind of stuff and take better advantage of the infrastructure that we have. It certainly won't be free to do this kind of a project, to add that lane back in. It's not just you could take down the barrier and let the cars go. There's work that needs to be done on the west side of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to accommodate the car. It has to be done anyway. You take a look at those interchanges along 580 in Marin County, and they're 1950 special. And we need to put money aside for these projects, right? And somehow they don't get done. So I think if the private sector could be involved, would be potentially a really good thing. I think there's ways to incorporate private capital and private enterprise in getting us out of bumper to bumper traffic. I don't know if any of your listeners like bumper. Maybe it's good for the podcast business.
Yeah, hopefully you're stuck in traffic and listening to this. But yeah, I think most people would rather have
you're stuck in traffic, gripping the wheel and wishing there were solutions. Make sure your company is a member of the Bay Area Council. And we're trying really hard to work on these things. It have been. It's a lot of work. Accomplished a lot, but there's a lot more to do.
I'm going to throw out to at least my LinkedIn audience and podcasters, just out of curiosity, who would pay a toll on 37 to have that road fixed and improved, and curious to see what we get. And I'll share those results. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. There needs to be well thought out, but just if we can take an initial poll and maybe get 100 or 200 people's feedback on that, I'm going to put that on LinkedIn and in the show notes the same day this airs. Appreciate that. Jim, any final thoughts before we head out?
No, just thanks for having me aboard and doing this show. And I think it's important that we talk about these issues and the opportunities we have. This is an interesting time for the Bay Area. It's probably not seen as our best time. And there's some questioning going on as to whether the Bay Area will continue to be the thought leading place and the go-to place and the California Here I Come place that we've been in the past. And I still feel like I'm very happy to be here. I think it's a tremendous lifestyle that we have and really appreciate the advantages that it affords. But there are challenges and we need to overcome them. And that's what I go to work to do.
Great. Well, thank you. This was Jim Wunderman from the Bay Area Council on the Capstone Conversation. Please hit subscribe today so you get the weekly updates of when we release the next episode. And we are giving away a $25 Amazon gift card to somebody that leaves us a 5-star review and leave the comments, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon. Thank you for doing that for us. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Capstone Government Affairs and Economic Development, a firm where I serve as managing partner. For more information, check us out at www.capstonegov.com and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government. Thank you for listening to today's show. Check out the show notes, and for a full transcript, visit our website, www.capstonegov.com, and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government, or you can find me, your host, Jared Ash.